Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pictou County. Thank you for joining us here. So pleased my colleagues were able to join me here at beautiful Pictou Lodge. So we had some great meetings the last couple of days. What I would say of one of the most pleasant surprises that I've encountered in this role as premier is the amazing collegiate atmosphere between all premiers, but certainly between our Atlantic Canadian premiers as a region here. So we have very similar issues and very similar. We see the opportunities as well and the potential for the region. So it's been an absolute pleasure to stand beside my colleagues here. The last couple of days we've talked extensively, of course, about the cost of living, the incredible impact and pressure and strain it's putting on families across the region. For sure, we're all very conscious of that. Lots of talk about healthcare, how we can support each of our regions, support each of our constituents. A lot of chat around mobility of healthcare workers across the region. So we had some good discussions on that. Of course, immigration is an area where we're completely aligned. We all know that the growth of economies depend on people. So our regions are growing. We want to see that. We want to see more of that. So we want to welcome more people to the region. Immigration, a big topic of discussion, and of course, energy. Self-sustainability, self-sufficiency, and potential there. So, there's lots to talk about on those topics, and we're happy to take some questions on those and any other topics that we may have today. But thank you for joining us here in Pictou County, and I'll open the floor for questions, Catherine.
Go ahead.
Great here with Global. Just as you mentioned in your opening remarks there, and just with cost of living being such a focus right now, what specifically can be done? I know this has been mentioned previously, immediate measures to come in. What immediate measures can happen to alleviate some of the costs that Nova Scotians have been facing?
Thank you, Graham. I'll open and then turn the floor. But obviously, Nova Scotians and Canadians know that this is a bigger issue than any one province. I mean, you couldn't go to any community in the world right now and not see record gas prices. This is a worldwide thing, and certainly the pressure on our friends and neighbors and our communities is significant. We know that for sure, and I think really as we look forward and say, well, what's possible? I mean, we're really focused on looking for help that's sustainable. Little one-off things. I think that the real trick is looking for things that are sustainable and meaningful. So, work with the federal government around policy issues. I think there's things we can do there, but I want to be very, very clear with Nova Scotians in particular that this is a worldwide thing. Their government will support them, but we have limited tools in the face of worldwide inflation like this. But my colleagues maybe want to add to that.
Anything further to add in relation to policy? I think the uncertainty in the world market rate today is bringing this surge of increasing prices. Obviously, the war in Ukraine has kicked it all off. But I think we're going to need to see policies that are bringing certainty to energy supply, bringing certainty to continuity of policy, so that investors will come back into the fold. And that could change the market, very, very quickly, because it's the uncertainty that the market reacts to. And but to my colleague, Premier Houston, this is bigger than the province. This is a worldwide issue, and it needs us to take it as a national issue and how we can address on policy to reflect the necessary changes.
And I'd only add to that it's certainly something that we're all dealing with each and every day. We see the impacts on families, on business, on communities. Each of our jurisdictions have tried to help shield Islanders and Atlantic Canadians from the rising cost of living. And knowing that many of these factors are out of our control, but a lot of the things we talked about today and last night were around how, as a region, we can work a little bit more closely together, be a little bit more efficient, and try to take a little bit of ownership in terms of energy distribution, et cetera, to make life a little easier. So, but it's a big issue, and we'll continue to try to help to the best we can. And one of the most difficult issues of COVID, for example, a lot of these things we're forced to deal with as provinces and as individuals are not of our doing, but we're here, we're in these jobs, and it's our job to try to help. And that's what I felt, a lot of collaboration between all provinces and premiers the last day and a half. So I hope, and I'm confident that brighter days will be ahead.
Yeah, certainly I'd echo what the entire panel has said here today, that while the pressures may be ones beyond our control and geopolitical in nature, combined with the economic realities coming out of a stressed supply chain from COVID, we are in these jobs because we care about Atlantic Canadians, and we know that this is having an impact on them, on their grocery bills, on their way of life. And although we've taken slightly different approaches, the theme and narrative is the same, that we all care, we understand and are compassionate about how this is impacting the daily lives of individuals, and we are, like every global leader, frankly, struggling with solutions because many of these levers are beyond our reach. And you don't have to take our word for it. The President of the United States says so openly every day that he's struggling with the reality of inflation and trying to figure out the correct combination of levers to pull at the same time. That said, we collectively understand the impact that this has on Atlantic Canadians and families in particular. Coming out of one crisis into another is not fun. It's not fun for us, but we want to be there to support people through this tough time.
What energy policy do you expect from the federal government?
Yes, if I was to comment on that, what we need is certainty of investment that can come here, and you know, not policies won't change in 3 or 4 years' time to make the investment kind of obsolete. I think what we're seeing from the federal government, we're seeing certainly a renewed interest to look at some of the traditional energy sources just to get us through this patch, and we're seeing that certainly with Premier Furey and what's been approved in the offshore development. I think where we are right now is in the transition of going to a greener economy, but what we realize is that there are huge gaps in supply, in timelines, and in costs. So it has to be a move as we mitigate our exposure, because now we find we're in an energy-rich country like Canada. We find ourselves vulnerable to world issues like never before. I mean, we could be subjected to pricing volatility, but we're subjected now to actual supply volatility. And that shouldn't be happening here to Canada. But not only that, we should be a major contributor to the situation for our allies. And we feel in the Atlantic region we can play a major role in that. And there are investors that want to come here and be part of the solution. And I think we're seeing signs that the federal government want to be part of that now, recognizing it's real. And to that point, we need to have the policies that allow investors to come and know that their investment is secure and that they can be willing partners for us to help solutions for the world.
Can you be more specific on that? Are you talking about LNG export out of St. John and the Repsol terminal, and like with regards to federal policies, are we talking about like a pipeline?
In terms of the gas development and in terms of the LNG facility, it could be converted to an LNG export facility. It will need a gas supply, but its conversion could be in roughly maybe 3 years. It is a significant conversion opportunity. But it does need, there need to be a security of that as a transition opportunity. But I think what bodes well, we're all looking at potentially hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen down the road. A facility like that, you know, can be easily converted to hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen, and be then transported as well. So I think what we're seeing is what's the reality right today that we can actually move on today, we can actually have solutions today, and we won't be held ransom by Russia. Because that's what our economy is being held to, that's what Ukraine is facing, but that's what we're facing in the world. So we shouldn't be have this exposure right now. So we can move along a transition economy and energy supply and mitigate the exposure. I've said recently, we're looking at double-digit numbers in electrical costs over the coming years, and in each year, really, of the coming years. And we're going to be faced with that, and we have to have a policy that's going to start to mitigate the energy costs. So we think we have inflation now, which we do, that we need solutions now, rules now, that are going to mitigate that inflation getting out of hand.
I think what a solid policy arrangement with the federal government, which I believe there's a solid partner in dealing with the energy crisis, allows us to unlock the potential across our provinces, whether it's in LNG, whether it's in Newfoundland and Labrador's offshore oil and gas, or in the development of future hydrogen projects. If you look at the arc, we're moving from a carbon-based to gas-based to potentially hydrogen-based. That's not going to happen overnight. We need to set the ecosystem, the policy, the certainty within the policy of the ecosystem so that investors are attracted here and recognize that Atlantic Canada can play a large role to solve the geopolitical issues that have arisen suddenly. There's no one going back to Russian oil and gas immediately. Even we all hope that there's peace in the Ukraine tomorrow, but it's not going to alleviate the issues with the energy crisis. And I love hearing myself speak. It's quite brilliant. I'll end there.
What about gas tax at the pump? That is under provincial control.
Can we just wait until this is sorted out? It's incredibly distracting.
There we go.
Yeah. I try to avoid my hearing myself.
No problem. What about the price, the gas taxes, the provincial portion of gas taxes at the pump?
Well, we've all taken a different approach on this, I think. Our province cut it by 50%, temporarily, recognizing that we had the highest gas price, one of the highest gas prices across the country, save British Columbia. So that was something that our government felt was important, temporarily, recognizing that summer was going to be an incredible moment of strain for individuals. But I recognize that that's not the solution to the energy crisis. It was a temporary relief for citizens of the province, and we think it was measured and balanced.
I just want to go back to the overall question on the energy stuff, because the region, we have incredible opportunities. The potential is just massive around offshore wind and certainly Bay of Fundy, and the overall potential is very, very significant. So as a region, we recognize that potential. We want to take steps to make sure it's realized. So we we'll work with at the departmental level to make sure we have the right regulations, to make sure we have the right legislation, so we're attractive as a region. Back to Premier Higgs' point, and we'll be making that case, working with the federal government. And I think the federal government is a willing partner on that stuff too, and there's a role for them in the regulations and the legislation as well. So those are that's a good news story. The potential there is very, very significant. And just back to, in terms of the cost of living at the day-to-day, the most obvious thing, the price at the pump is a huge pressure on every family in the country, and certainly in Atlantic Canada. So, I mean, we're always considering the options of how we can support Nova Scotians, and certainly that is the gas tax in particular is something that we're looking at. We'll continue to look at. But this is it's a big issue, and we want to make sure that we're supporting Atlantic Canadians, that we're supporting Nova Scotians with approaches that are sustainable. So we don't just defer a shock later on. But people are struggling. There's no question about that, and we're conscious of that, and we'll do what we can to support them.
I'm just curious from the other maritime premiers on that question as well with the gas taxes. Is that something you're inching closer to? Do you feel you're maybe being pressed, you have to go that route? Or if not, why are you holding out?
Well, we already introduced a $20 million program that we could get out quickly through June and get to certainly low-income people that are most vulnerable, whether it be senior citizens, low-income people with disabilities, but to get to where it was needed, because we knew the impact it was having in everyday community living and everyday ability to even buy groceries. So then you look at the actual the gas tax piece of it, and you say, well, what we've done with that in terms of that revenue is put that is going right out into our health system, into every network that we provide for social assistance, for roads. So it's all being used in the system to manage our going forward. And when you look at the volatility in the gas prices, which changed dramatically, so we hit a high of about 218, maybe 216, somewhere in that range, and now it's down to 205, 206. So, you know, if you drop it 4 or 5 cents and then it goes right back up, it's like, do people feel it? Do they see it? Or can we give help where it's needed the most? So that has been our focus. And I guess as I said earlier, I think there's a real opportunity to see stability come into this market, because if we make the right decisions here, we can solve an energy crisis and provide an energy solution that will see an immediate impact.
And look, for Prince Edward Island, I think everything remains on the table in terms of how we can help shield islanders from the rising cost of living. I mean, it's no secret that the highest inflation in the country is in Prince Edward Island, and as an end user where everything comes to our province and leaves on wheels, with the price of fuel being what it is, it adds to the cost of everything, including groceries. So we've tried to not just identify those who burn fuel, we've tried to help across the board. So we've spent close to $50 million in terms of relief packages for islanders in a variety of ways. We've implemented Toonie Transit from the rural parts of the province into the major centers. We're connecting the major center of Charlottetown to Cavendish, where many people work in the summertime with transit. We've essentially doubled the number of islanders who would be eligible for free heat pumps and free hot water heaters getting into the winter, because we feel the best investment that we can make is to end the reliance on fossil fuels, which has the volatility that we're seeing. So I think everyone has taken a different approach a little bit, but overall the goal is just to try to use the position that you have as the leader of government and the first place where people in your province turn for assistance, realizing you can't do everything and you can't help everybody, but you really have to try to do the most you can to get people through that, and that's what we've done to date. We've all done it through COVID. I've done it through potato wart crisis, and now we're doing it through cost of living, and that's the responsibility we have, and that's how we've answered that's how we've responded to date. But I think it's fair to say, as this continues, that everything needs to be on the table.
During your conversations, gentlemen, where was the Atlantic Loop in the conversation? What's the fate of it? Is it on time? How does it play into it?
So listen, the Atlantic Loop is a critical piece to the overall puzzle. There's no question about that. So we're committed to the Atlantic Loop. Time's passing. So we're committed, but we need to make sure that we have clarity on the path forward from the perspective of the federal government. We need to make sure that we have some clarity from the federal government on their timelines and of course their financial commitments. So this is an ongoing discussion for sure with the federal government. I do believe that we have a policy commitment from the federal government. I think we're on the same page on that for sure. But we just need to make sure that now it's really time to get the clarity on the timeline and the financial support on it. But the Atlantic Loop is it's a tremendous opportunity, and it's a very significant piece to the puzzle.
I would just say that it's not the only piece of the puzzle, though. I think that as we look to energy markets well into the future, we do have to be open-minded about other alternatives other than save the Atlantic Loop. And to Premier's point, this needs to start fairly quickly. Having lived in a province that just is completing a mega project, they don't happen overnight. They need significant due diligence, they need planning, they need engineering, and then they need the actual construction time. So we all believe that we need to meet these, or strive to meet these aggressive climate targets with our partners in the federal government, but it's time to really to come with a more formulated plan that allows us to achieve those goals. And if those goals are aspirational and not achievable, then we need to be realistic with the public as well about how we are going to move in that direction to mitigate the effects of climate change at every opportunity.
Great, we're going to go to the phones now. Keith Doucette, do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right, well, on that Atlantic Loop, what is exactly the holdup? I know there's discussions with Ottawa, and but we your own minister responsible for this has said in the past, as early as maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, that time's running out on this and we have to get things moving. What is the holdup?
Yeah, time is definitely marching on. There's no question. That's why we're talking about, like, we really need some clarity on the path forward from the perspective of the federal government. As I said, I do believe that ideologically we're aligned on the policy commitment is there. But now it's time for for the rubber to really hit the road on the financial aspects of it. So the ratepayers are my primary concern for sure. There's a lot of pressure on families right now. We talked about the cost of living already. So these things we need to make sure that everyone we just need some clarity from the federal government. I would say is the best way to say that is to their plans, their ideas and the timeline and their commitment towards the finances of it. So we'll continue to have those discussions, but we also understand that time is moving, and we need to make sure that if everyone's on the same page, as Premier Furey said, if we're to meet the targets, we're gonna need some help. So we need that clarity from the federal government.
If I was to just add to the concerns about the Atlantic Loop, even in the current projections, it cannot fulfill the needs of the Atlantic region. So it also, the timelines can't be met that are currently proposed, because as Premier Furey said, the timelines for big projects like this are significant. So the current standards of 2030, 2035 are going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to meet. And so the reality is, and Premier Houston talking about the clarity of what we need in the reality to put with it, and then the multiple inputs into the energy solution. So for us in Atlantic Canada, we have great potential, as the Premier has mentioned, and we can be part of the solution. So it's not a federal solution to an Atlantic problem. We can be a significant player here, and we need multiple sources into this system to meet our energy needs. And I think that's what we see going forward here, is there has to be kind of a phase of solutions that bridge, or we're going to get hit with huge energy costs. And we're all talking about how do we manage and reduce the home energy bill, and through whether it be heat pumps or whether other alternatives, but we have to manage energy costs and be smarter about the usage, but also be smarter about how we get our source and supplies.
Keith, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it's for my colleague in Brunswick. Premier Higgs, what's the future of shale gas?
So I didn't get all that question, but I think you said the future of shale gas. And so where we are right now is that Repsol are certainly looking at, and they've had meetings with the federal government on the expansion or I should say refurbishment of the plant to an LNG export facility. We already connected with supply from the U.S., but it wouldn't necessarily be an adequate supply for the size the plant needs to be. So I've had meetings, just preliminary discussions with First Nations, preliminary discussions with other developers in the region that have looked at our gas sources and basically, given us an insight into what's available. We require more research, but we know that we have the potential. It is something that could meet the timelines of meeting demands and concerns in Europe of, maybe in the order of 3 years or so. But the idea is that we need all hands on deck to make it happen. And obviously that includes First Nations, but it includes developers and it includes policies that work for people to invest. It isn't a matter of giving companies more money to do this. It's a matter of giving them the runway and the policies to allow it to happen. And that's kind of, so is there a future there? Possibly. But it has to be a future that people see as transitioning into a greener economy, because it can't be in isolation. It can't be the only solution, because the wind, the solar, the hydrogen are all part of our greener future.
Great. Moving on to Adam Houras. Do you have a question for the premiers?
Yes, thank you. I just want to follow up on the Atlantic Loop as well. You've all stated a problem about rates. You've stated concern about a lack of a timeline, a lack of a commitment for money. So I just want to go back to that question again. Why aren't those solved yet? What's stopping that from happening? project on the road?
Well, I think this is an incredibly big project and a big undertaking crossing 5 jurisdictions. So to be fair to the federal government, this does require due process, and they have willing partners at this table. And I believe, as the premiers have said, that they are willing and wanting to solve this problem for Atlantic Canada as well. And the reality is, some of it does take time. It's just, are the timeframes equivalent with the objectives of 2030? And I think that this will be solved over time. It's just we need to move quicker now at the not the negotiating table, but at the procedure table, the process table, I suppose, with the federal government to ensure that we're able to meet those targets, which I believe we all want to meet, as they're the responsible ones too.
Adam, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Premiers, you last met in March when you emerged with a proposal to share doctors and surgeons in efforts to get patients the care they needed faster. You had resolved, I think, to identify some different specialties in your respective provinces that had excess capacity. I just wanted to hear from each of you if you found that excess capacity and how you're sharing it with the province.
I found one. Now, we're looking internally with our own capacity and to ensure that we're coming up with creative solutions to ensure that, for example, hospitals that perhaps aren't using their OR capacity to their fullest to do things like hip and knee replacements could be used differently with itinerant surgeons and anesthesiologists and the team flying in, for example, and not having patients come to St. John's. We've also kind of announced outpatient hip and knee replacements, which is being done across the country, of course, but all of this will help with some of the surgical backlogs. But there's not an excess of surgeons or family doctors across the country. That's just not a reality. So I think amongst ourselves, we shared stories of backlogs. We've shared ideas moving forward, and we've also shared the idea of mobility of surgeons, physicians, and surgeons across jurisdictions, and I think that that's worthy of a serious discussion. And equally, how we streamline IMGs coming into the system. IMGs have served the system in Newfoundland and Labrador very well for a very long time. And we're at the perfect storm of a changing paradigm in how medical students are coming and practicing medicine, and senior surgeons and physicians are retiring. So we need to recognize that the practice of medicine is changing. We also need to figure out how to supplement that human resource gap with IMGs in an effective, safe way that's standardized across the country. And frankly, that the standards are shared across these 4 jurisdictions to allow mobility when required.
Yeah, so just if I could on that, so last time we talked about the health accord with the Atlantic provinces, and that had a number of aspects to it, procurement, certainly healthcare professional mobility. We've chatted about that, international graduates, but also wait times and addressing wait times. And I think that's really the point you're getting at there, Adam. And I'll tell you, is we're all looking internally in how we can, where we can find efficiencies, where we can find capacity. And I'll tell you that in Nova Scotia, there's a tremendous focus on just removing administrative burdens that may consume time in a healthcare professional's day. Things like duplicate forms, purposes behind doctor's notes. These would be a couple of aspects. So what I would say to you is that that work is ongoing. It will probably always be ongoing. We'll always continue to search for efficiencies and to search for places where we can add capacity by making things more efficient. But we have certainly identified in Nova Scotia areas where we can make it a lot, where we can remove burdens from healthcare professionals. So the short answer is that we continue to look to add efficiencies and capacities to the system, and we probably always will.
Yeah, and I think for Prince Edward Island's perspective, when we left that meeting in March, I think we all knew we didn't have an excess of much other than challenge and issues, yeah, and patience. But it's really, each jurisdiction is trying to best deliver services to the broader growing population, and we're trying to do so underneath the veil of the reality that there's less health human resource available and more jurisdictions competing for it. So we're really in Prince Edward Island trying to better utilize, as we are in all provinces in Atlantic Canada, to better utilize each each service, whether it's pharmacists, nurse practitioners, RNs, LPNs, et cetera, and to try to best utilize that system to make sure that there's patient care for islanders. And as Prince Edward Island, I mean, we've utilized in partnership with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick for many years for heart surgeries, for cancer treatment, for other. So we have always been very from a pro-Atlantic approach to the overall delivery of healthcare. We rely on it. And as we grow larger and as the challenges continue to face us, I think all of us are going to need to depend on one another a little bit more to do that, because the end goal has to be giving the best possible healthcare we can give to our citizens. And as we age and live longer, that challenge becomes even larger. So that's what I took from the meeting, Adam, in Halifax in March, and there was a further discussion today about how we can just work together, as both Premier Furey and Premier Houston highlighted.
I guess from New Brunswick's perspective, we, looking at the challenges, we've talked already about the certifications and having the colleges work together to help better coordination of resources, medical resources, having associations, nursing associations work better, closer together so we can move people around easier, having the ability to bring people into the country and have them certified quicker. We've moved forward with legislation in that regard because we need to get people in the hospitals quicker. The nurses have recognized particularly their challenges over the last few years, and which we certainly understand, and how we can mitigate that. We've asked for actually retired nurses that could come back on vacation relief because they did come back in record numbers during the vaccinations requirements in COVID. So we've actually put out a request to retired nurses, and that could make a big step change this summer on vacation relief. I think for us in New Brunswick, the better coordination between Vitality and Horizon. I mean, we've operated independently, and we will continue to have two networks, but we need them to be coordinated in their ability to deliver. The changes in the healthcare program, with using other disciplines to be a part of that care model. So whether it be pharmacies, whether it be the extramural, whether it be in terms of our paramedics, we need more resources doing similar functions to offload some of the cases in the doctors. So I think we're all looking at being combined in that. The other big aspect of us in discussions is how we work with each other as opposed to compete with each other in our respective provinces. Because competing with resources and moving around is not going to be helpful for all of us. And we need our medical professionals to basically say, it's not about how much more I can get paid, it's about how I can help be part of the solution, because every province is trying to get more people. So we're not any different, but we can be more innovative because we're smaller, we're nimbler, and we have a great cooperative team.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Premiers.